So once again, in this video, I'm just going to pick up where we left off, and I'm going to go ahead and take this drawn and outlined example and give it some of the areas in the corners, like how this one has. And to do that, I'm just going to go in directly with my Sharpie. I could use an ultra fine tip, I could use a regular fine tip. I'm going to actually use, if I can find it, the tip that is like this, which is sort of in between the ultra fine tip and the regular tip. And then I'm just going to go ahead and pick a spot, and I'm going to draw a line that curves sort of from one line to the next. So I'll zoom in a little bit there. So this is just going to curve so that instead of being a point there, it turns into a curve. And then if you have a spot here, like where your Sharpie kind of overlaps into the next section, now is also a good time to just make this line a little thicker, still keeping it nice and smooth there in a gradual thickness, and just kind of cover over that little spot. So then I'm going to go up to this corner, do the same thing, turn it into a curved connection here. Now it's important when you are doing this step to make sure that you start and stop inside of that line. Otherwise you're going to end up with pencil lines or Sharpie lines that sort of go out of it, and then your effect is going to be a little bit ruined. So you want to make sure that you are starting with a finer Sharpie in the line, curving up to the next line, and then fill in that space in between. And then if you need to smooth it out more, you can. So it does take a little patience, it does take a little practice. If you feel more comfortable doing the line with the pencil first, you certainly can. But for me, I find that that does add an extra step. And then I still have to outline with the Sharpie, which basically is the same thing. So for me, I tend to jump right in with the Sharpie on this step. And remember, this step is completely optional. But basically, every time you have a corner, what you want to do is turn that corner into a curve. So that you're just kind of rounding out all those curves, or all the corners into curves, I should say. So definitely feel free to turn the page often while you are doing this technique if you decide to. And just take your time with it. Again, it is optional. You do not necessarily have to even do this step. But I am going to film while I continue to work on this example. I will not necessarily give a bunch of verbal reminders because it's primarily just so you guys can see how it's done. So there's one rose that is completely done in that style. I would go ahead and move right along to the next lines. And now these lines, even though they are between two roses, like this is the front rose, this is the back rose, I'm still going to do the same thing. I'm still going to curve that space, even if the lines that I am combining are two separate images, or two separate parts. So you'll see that some parts take a little more of a filler, and then some there's not much added to that corner at all. Now on some of the areas, you'll see that I kind of lift up my Sharpie a little bit too soon, and then that makes an uneven line that I can actually see. So what I do is go into those spaces and sort of thicken up my line, so that instead of there being a bump, it's a nice smooth transition. So it's okay if you have to make some of your lines thicker so that you can make that curve smoother. And once again, remember that this is an optional step. Some people just tend to like the way that it looks. Plus, it does definitely look more like stained glass this way. Because like I was saying, the metal that is used in stained glass, this is how it would be joined. Not with Sharpie, obviously. So again, I'm just turning the page however often I need. Because you will learn the curves are easier for you in certain directions. And it's just going to be best to figure out the way that you work best and work accordingly. Because that is definitely going to vary from one person to the next. Let's see. Oops. So then I've got a thicker spot in here, so I'm going to actually just bring this curve down and make it a little larger than I typically would to just kind of cover over that. So that then that becomes a nice smooth curve with no marks sticking out. So again, it's perfectly okay if some areas are a lot thicker than others. Just make sure that you are willing to be okay with that if you do choose to do the step. Otherwise, you will end up frustrating yourself if you try to make everything the exact same thickness or thinness. So now all 3 roses have been done with that sort of neurological technique where you just kind of connect the corners with a curve. So I'm going to go ahead and finish out this example, and then I will post a picture of it completely finished, and I'll add it to the Google Slides where I have the entire step-by-step for this one, so that you can see every single step of the process of this one, but then you'll also see the finished outlined version of this one. And then, like I said, whether or not I do color demonstration videos will be determined by whether or not you feel like you need them, because I don't want you to feel limited to certain ways of adding color, shading, and detail.